So this is our introduction to the Alternatives to University pathway. Primarily tonight looking at apprenticeships and how to begin your careers research. It's really important when we're thinking about apprenticeships to look at both of those things together. So hopefully we can give you a nice introduction to what apprenticeships are, how you can start to look at them and those types of things. So this is what we aim to do today. Look at the levels and the framework for apprenticeships. How do they work? And we won't go too much into detail on that, but just we'll give you an overview. We'll also give you an overview of searching and applying for an apprenticeship, sort of timeframes, work experience, and then we're going to hand over to Luke, and he's going to give you his really valuable insight into what it is actually like to be on an apprenticeship straight out of college. So hopefully that will be really useful. So why apprenticeships? Now, I'm assuming that you guys here are all very interested in that. So you may have your own ideas about why it is that you are thinking about pursuing an apprenticeship after college. But as you can see there, some of the benefits of an apprenticeship are, first and foremost, no tuition fees. And that seems to be, one of the real big driving factors for a lot of students. We all know that university can be very costly. And so obviously, whilst you're studying, you're having to pay for that, those fees for university as well. Whereas with an apprenticeship, that's all paid for or funded. And not only that, you're earning as well. So that's, double sort of, helpful with when it comes to cost of living and all of those things. Another good advantage is that you're able to specialise really early. So rather than doing something quite generic, you're able to then specialise pretty much straight away in the field that you're actually interested in, which is why we're going to talk about careers research a little bit later. And it can improve your skills and employability. So it can make you a really desirable candidate for somebody later on down the line, an employer, because actually you have had that specialist training quite early on. You've got a lot of employability skills, and that can take you a really long way. As you can see there, I've put up the apprenticeship levels, and that really just is to help you to start to put into context the different levels and what they sort of equate to in terms of perhaps your qualifications that you're a little bit more familiar with. So you can see there that intermediate level is sort of level 2, which is the equivalent to GCSE level. Advanced level 3 is equivalent to A levels, and then higher level 4 and 5, and degree level 6 and 7. And that's important because actually many students, when they leave college, really do want to go on to a degree apprenticeship, and that is possible, certainly, and there are sectors where you can apply straight for degree apprenticeships out of college. However, there are also a lot of career sectors that require you to start at actually that lower level for an apprenticeship, so that you get that underpinning knowledge to then be able to develop that further and work your way up in the levels as you go. So what we usually advise students to do is, yes, look at the degree level apprenticeships, absolutely, but also look at the level 3 and 4s and 5s, so that you can actually get a really good idea about what's out there. And it may be that that is an appropriate place to start for you, depending on the sector that you're looking for. We would always encourage you to look at those advanced and higher apprenticeships as well as those degree apprenticeships. As you can see there, the framework of apprenticeship is that you will have 20% off the job training. So you'll be working for 80% of the time, and 20% of the time you'll have that for the academic study, the theory, whatever it is that you'd like to call it. Usually given to you by a training provider. It might be a university, it might be a college, it could be a private training provider. I myself did a degree apprenticeship through the college, and the training was provided by a private training provider, and that was done remotely. Some training providers do that in person. It really does vary and depend on the type of role that you've applied for. You can see there some of the other areas that really underpin an apprenticeship. So you have the functional skills. That's something that you need to make sure that you can demonstrate in that English and maths. Obviously, by doing A levels, you will already have those, but it's just, it is an essential part of the apprenticeship as well. You have that underpinning knowledge, which is provided to you from your theory, but as well from your actual job where you'll be trained whilst you're working. The national apprenticeship standards. So all apprenticeships conform to a national apprenticeship standard, much in the same way that your A level conforms to the curriculum. And so you can search for the national apprenticeship standards, and we'll put a link on for that later, so that you can see the type of things that actually go into making up what an apprenticeship is. At the end of every apprenticeship, you will have an endpoint assessment. For me, that consisted of a large report where I had to deliver that to the college, and a 2-hour interview, which was tested and timed with my assessor. For other qualifications, it will be different, and I'm sure Luke will be able to give you some good information about that. So that's also an integral part of that apprenticeship, and you won't be able to pass that apprenticeship and your qualification without going through that endpoint assessment. They refer to it often as the gateway. And then all through that, you should be getting your support also from your training provider, but also from your employer all the way through. And it's really important when you're looking for apprenticeships and you're going for interviews, is to really have that open dialogue with the employer to make sure that what you expect is what you're going to be receiving. So ensure that, you know, your career sort of pathway is what you want it to be, what the training will look like, how you will get your on-the-job training. So all of those things can make a really big difference. So it's worth just really investigating that and researching that beforehand. So, searching and applying, a lot of links on there, and we will send those links out to you. We'll put them in the chat, but we'll also send them out to you by email afterwards as well. And as you can see there, there's a number of different ways that you can start to search for apprenticeships. And I would say that it's never really too early to start to look what's out there. I think the vast majority of people that we've got online at the moment is probably year 12. And although, yes, you're starting off on your A levels, it's really important to know actually that you fast forward to a year's time when you're in year 13, what it is that's actually out there. So using Unifrog Apprenticeship Search or the UCAS Hub or the Apprenticeship government website can be really helpful to help you start to look at what's out there, what the job market is like, what kind of skills and experience employers are looking for, so that you can start to plan that. And we'll get on to work experience a little bit later on. You can also start to use LinkedIn to network with employers that you might be interested in trying to do some work with. And we actually have a Padlet, a virtual notice board that we advertise apprenticeship and employment opportunities on. And that's also worth keeping a really good eye on, because again, you never quite know when an opportunity is going to come along. And I'm sure Luke will talk about his sort of journey. And it really did start at college in these kinds of environments. So it's worth always just doing that research and looking at what's out there. And when to apply. So that's equally important. Degree apprenticeships, if you're in year 13, you'll be looking at those now. You'll be looking at sort of what's being advertised. Usually the larger companies like BBC, HSBC, PwC, perhaps all of those larger firms will start to advertise degree apprenticeships around now, because that falls in line with the sort of broadly with the university application process. For those apprenticeships that are slightly lower, advanced and higher level, they'll start to come online a little bit later on in the year, maybe spring, summer next year. And you'll start to see perhaps more of the small and mid-sized companies advertise those apprenticeships then as well. But that's not always the case. Some of the larger companies will advertise and recruit all year round in cycles. So again, it's about that knowledge and research so you can really understand what's out there when you come to start applying for them, so that you don't miss out on anything. We do find that those lower level apprenticeships tend to be more numerous than the higher level, the degree apprenticeships, and don't have such a rigorous recruitment process. But we're here to help you with that. So if you have an application that you need us to check, or a CV, or you'd like to do a mock interview, then we can certainly help you with that. And we would always encourage students not to just apply for one apprenticeship or job. apply for as many as you can, because you would never just apply for one university. So it's the same principle. Try as many as you can, because I think that's really, really important. You need to have backup options, and certainly by knowing what's out there, and applying to a number of different places, it gives you the options then. You know, some people worry that they get offered too many, but that's actually a great position to be in. So absolutely, plenty of backup options is a good thing. So I'm going to hand over to Lou now, and she's going to go through with you researching your choices. So here she is, and I'll hand over to her.
Thanks, Faye. Right, so obviously looking for apprenticeships, because they are very job specific and more vocationally driven, you really need to be clear about what you might want to do. And that involves the same thing, whether you want to go to university or whatever route you want to take. And I would just stress that in actual fact, deciding to go down an apprenticeship route can also be done alongside applying to university. It is like a dual carriageway. You can go down both roads, and you don't have to make that decision until much later on. So even if you're thinking of applying to university, you can continue to research for an apprenticeship. And actually, it's good practice to look, even if you know you want to go to university and you know you want to study a subject, for instance, something like maths, it's still a good idea to have some really good groundwork done in careers research. So a couple of examples here, and Faye's going to put all of these in the chat. Prospects is a really good careers library. It's a website that we would recommend. And it is where you can look up job profiles, where you can explore how to get there, and also some of the sort of more labour market information as well about employability. The same applies to Unifrog. If you're in year 12 this week in your tutorials, you'll be signing on to Unifrog. It's a platform we use quite a lot and extensively as far as Faye and I are concerned with careers research. And it's really, really a very good platform. It's very intuitive, so it takes you round careers, subjects, apprenticeships, and combines it all the way through. So I'd actually really like you all to have a really good look at both Prospects and Unifrog if you're starting to do your research. They also have some quizzes, and whilst a quiz might sound a little bit of a sort of an immature thing to do, they're used very much in industry and in recruitment to gauge appropriate skills, qualities, and aspirations for people against a job vacancy. And so doing these personality profiles and interests profiles and quizzes can actually give you a lot of knowledge about yourself and also some suggested careers and subjects. And I think that's actually a really, really useful start for somebody who doesn't know perhaps what to do at all. Faye, could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So this is how Unifrog looks, just in the careers library, very briefly, because we want to get on to talking to Luke. But this is how it looks. So each of those little boxes will give you a suggested career profile. And in the subjects library, it will give you a subject that you could study at university. It might be psychology, whereas if you look in the careers library, it would be a psychologist. So you're kind of marrying up very much subjects and careers. And as I say, it's quite intuitive. Each of those boxes, if you press on read the profile, it then goes into a lot of detail, as you can see here, about the kinds of skills that you might want to demonstrate in order to have a good match for that. So that can lead on to where do I need to fill those gaps and work experience, and also what entry requirements do I need. It'll continue down to how-to guides, and it'll talk about additional careers that might be similar that you might want to look at. Thanks, Faye. One of the really good things that this would help you do, and is this. I think this actual profile is on our website, and it will be available to all of those on the Alternatives to University pathway. It's a really good way of mapping the skills that you saw in the last slide against perhaps one of the careers that you're looking at, to have a look at, do I have those relevant skills for this career pathway? And if not, where there are the gaps and how can I develop these? You can see this example here as a solicitor, things like literacy, analysis, independence. Well, you get some of those things, perhaps literacy and analysis, from your subjects. But maybe the time management and organisation, or perhaps the communication skills, you might be missing, and those could be supplied perhaps by getting either a part-time job, some work experience, and finding out where you match that career choice profile. Thanks, Faye. So thereafter, understanding the benefits of that work experience that I've just mentioned means that you get a better understanding of the career sector or the role itself. It could be quite difficult, for instance, particularly say in law or maybe in medicine. It's actually quite difficult under the age of 18 to gain some of these experiences. So actually, sometimes it's about looking at those skills and finding out where can I actually learn to use those skills and develop those to be able to demonstrate them, that I have then transferable to somewhere that I need them. So it's about learning the professional language. One of the things that I think Faye and I are really keen on with yourselves who are really interested in apprenticeships, and Luke will talk a little bit about this, I think, is that actually who you're speaking to are business people. They are employers. They aren't at university where they're talking about academic study. So it's beginning to understand the language of business. And that's where, as Faye mentioned, places like LinkedIn, Indeed, can actually give you the cues that you need in order to be able to put together a good CV, a good conversation, and develop those business language transferable skills that enable you to talk to business people and give you the confidence that you're actually able to network and speak to people about their businesses, as I say, rather than perhaps speaking to an academic. Thanks, Faye. So where can you find work experience? The Padlet that Faye's mentioned, friends and family, the pathways that we've asked you to all sign up for. And if you look back in your emails, you'll find out if you want to join additional pathways, you can certainly do that. LinkedIn, Indeed, and virtual work experience, perhaps via somewhere like SpringPod or Speakers for Schools. Remember to think outside the box. We've put it there in kind of bold. You have to be a bit creative because you're not always going to find a work experience in the exact role that you're looking at. If you want to be an actuary, you're very unlikely to be able to follow somebody who's actually in that profession. So it's finding those skills out using the websites we've talked about, and then thinking outside the box. Where could I find that? So it could be that it's in an HR department, or it might be that a social worker might offer something to do with psychology. It's thinking a bit creatively. We run workshops here at the college for students in both year 12 and 13, and you'll see those advertised soon, so that you can actually come along and talk to Faye and I. We can give you some more ideas and stimulate that process. Okay, Faye, next slide, thank you. So in summary, before we speak to Luke, start your research now, never too early, year 12, and certainly obviously in year 13. Get some work experience, really important. Again, Luke will talk to you about that, but Faye and I will be able to identify very often successful candidates at those higher level apprenticeships when we see the raft of work experience that they will have done prior to application. We actually can identify those students who are keen enough to have gone out, found those themselves, and actually have those in their hands before they put together an application. and are looking. Sign up to the websites we mentioned so you get alerts. That's particularly looking at the UCAS alert and the government website. And year 13 should definitely look at that. So look at the upcoming events in the handouts and in everything that we put together. Look at your comms, really important, the social media, the comms that we send out, really have a look at those. Make sure you identify what's important for you. Make a careers appointment or come to one of the drop-ins that Faye and I run. Email careers@keds.ac.uk, and you're all signed up hopefully to the Alternatives to University pathway. But if you haven't, you can either sign up as we've suggested in the pathways sign up emails, but also if not, if you're struggling, email careers@ and we'll sign you up as well. I'd really like to hand over to Luke because he's done this and has the experience. So Luke, if you could come online for us and I can welcome you. Hi Luke, really good to see you today. Thank you so much for joining us.
That's all right.
We've done a whistle-stop tour through our King Ed sort of spiel here, but most important is listening to your experience and then coming on to any questions at the end. Are you okay if I go off camera and we'll leave you to have a chat through?
Yeah, of course. I won't take too
Thank you.
much time anyway. So 2 years ago, I was sat in most of your positions, really unsure of what I wanted to do. I'd gone to uni open days and I could just tell I didn't like the feel of the place. So started talking to different people about other options. Now, I do accounting, which is probably one of the careers more suited to apprenticeships, but there's lots of apprenticeships out there for any career really. So I just started looking around and I started applying really. But sometimes it can be difficult to know where to start. So I booked a meeting with the careers team at college and went through some mock interview questions which helped me prepare, and then went for my interview and then was offered the apprenticeship a couple of days later, and they were willing to wait till after I'd finished my A-levels to start. So what I would say really is if you don't know what you want to do, there's no rush now. Obviously there's lots of opportunities that are open now, but if you're still looking around universities and thinking, I'm not sure what career I want to do, as Faye said earlier, there's no rush or there's no limit on anywhere you can apply to, so don't limit yourself. And this is why I always say work experience is really important, because I did work experience in a private accounting practice, which is nothing like the job I do now. So there's lots of different types of environments you can work in one industry. So you might think you want to go into, I'm not sure, law, but then obviously there's lots of different types of law. So you could go and do family law for a day at work experience and hate it, but you might like criminal law. So I'd say if you can do as much work experience as possible now, it will make your life easier further down the line when you're deciding. And sometimes you could apply for an apprenticeship or apply for a role that you're probably not going to go to, but if you go to the interview and do the process, it's experience. So when you apply and do an interview for the role that you actually want, you know, you might think you're wasting other people's time, but actually, like me, I did that and ended up choosing my backup option as my actual option because I preferred it. So don't worry about applying to things that you're not 100% sure you're committed to. So my apprenticeship, it's just like a normal job, but 1 day a week I do my accounting qualification. So I have the same rights as an employee. I'm paid a salary. Have responsibility, but have allotted time, day release. So 80% of the time I'm working on the job, 20% of the time I'm studying my qualification. So it is exam based, and most will be exam based. So you'll probably do a unit for 6 to 10 weeks and then an exam. That's not just exclusive to accounting, that's quite common for most apprenticeships. And then at the end of the apprenticeship, sometimes you might do multiple apprenticeships. So I'm just finishing my level 4 and then I'll have to do my level 7. So again, as Faye said earlier, you have to go through a gateway. So alongside your exams, you'll be building up a portfolio, which is sort of coursework of projects you've worked on and things you've learned throughout the time in your apprenticeship. And you'll have a formal interview as well, so you'll be asked questions about things you've done in the role, and then you'll come out with it a lot of the time with your qualification or your degree, and then the apprenticeship as well. So you actually get both qualifications, which is nice, because obviously if you then want to go and do a professional qualification after that, you can, and add on the fact that you've had experience from your apprenticeship, which is why I say it's probably the main reason I wanted to go and do my apprenticeship, because when even a couple of years ago, most people still push towards uni. You get experience, and let me tell you, people mainly focus on experience. Yes, you want good grades. Yes, you want good qualifications. But when you walk in the interview room, people are assessing you and not the piece of paper you have. So I'd say focus as well on yourself and make sure you're fully prepared. And people, the stigma is, if you're clever, you go to university. If you're not so clever, you do an apprenticeship. Trust me, an apprenticeship isn't easy. Don't do it because you think it's the easy route. You're doing the same qualification as someone doing a degree, but you're working a 9 to 5 job. And it's not like if you go out the night before, you can skip your 9 a.m. lecture at university. It's nothing like that. If you don't turn up for work at 9 a.m., you're going to be sacked. So do not think it's easy, but it can be so rewarding, because again, most professional careers, accounting, law, teaching, many others, you end up having to do the qualification after university anyway. So actually, by doing an apprenticeship, you can be 3 or 4 years ahead, as Lou says, with no debt, all your qualifications paid for, but you come out with 3-4 years experience. So when the management job is coming out, they're looking at you next to say a graduate. You've got 4 years experience, the qualification. The graduate's just got their qualification with no experience, and the degree might not be related to the field of work they're going into. So I'd say that is a real good benefit. And apprenticeships aren't just for young people either. So you might do an apprenticeship now, and then there's someone at my work doing a master's degree in an apprenticeship. So again, you don't have to do it straight from college. You might really want to go to university for the social life or something like that. You can do an apprenticeship further down the line. It's not age capped or nothing like that. And what I would say is, I think the last generation of people to go to university is different to now. So with the way money is at the moment, I have the money to do the things I want. I'll still play cricket. I'll go and watch football every week. I'll go out on the weekends because I have my own money to do it. Whereas a lot of people that go to university need to have part-time jobs on nights and weekends to fund their degree. Whereas years ago, you would go to university mainly for the social life, and people think, well, apprenticeships, you don't really have much for social life. But it's changed a lot, and especially if you go into a professional apprenticeship, like a degree apprenticeship, you'll be invited to conferences and events, and you'll meet new people there and go out socially with them as well. So if you think you don't want to go and do an apprenticeship because of the responsibility and lack of social life and things like that, again, that's not true. You'll have a great social life. You'll meet lots of new people. And doing an apprenticeship, you won't just meet people your own age. You can gain experience from lots and lots of different people from lots of different age ranges. And most likely, it's not just going to be you that's starting. So you're not going to be in your own boat. And I was the only apprentice to start, but that isn't a bad thing, because you've got a whole department then, or a whole company just focused on you and building you up. So again, if you're on your own, it's not always the worst thing either. I don't think, Lou or Faye, I've got much more to add there. So I'm happy to answer any questions that people would have, if that's all right.
Brilliant. It's always so good to hear your experiences, Luke, I think, because actually you're a prime example of really somebody who came along, I think, to one of our business accounting and finance talks, which NHS Finance were delivering. And I think it was, as you said, thereafter that you applied for the vacancy and went through that process. Am I right with that?
Yeah, so I literally came along to one of these talks, but obviously it was in college, not on Teams at the time. And just
absolutely. So actually participating in things, you have no idea where they might lead. So I think a really good kind of lesson from that is to participate, and actually, take up those offers of experience.
Well, actually, I wasn't gonna. The talk was on I think it was at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday, and I didn't have a lesson until the afternoon, and I was dragged along by a mate of mine, and I was given the leaflet by the NHS Finance person, and I went home, put it on the side, and thought, I'm not applying to that. And then 2 weeks later, I thought it's not going to do any harm, and if I didn't do it, I wouldn't be where I am now. So don't discount anything from any career, any talk. Just you can never have too much information, or you
That's
might have
great.
information and then help someone else 2 years later and say, actually, I met someone from a company. Why don't you try that? So again, you can never go to too much stuff.
That's super. And somebody's asked in the chat, what A-level results did you get? And I guess that, I mean, that's up to you whether you want to share that. But I guess the relevance of that is perhaps comparing maybe the sort of application process of how, what they were looking for in your A-level grades, and how did that come to fruition once you'd got your grades and compared to university?
Okay, so a lot of places will do conditional, so they'll say like CCB or something like that. Whereas mine was unconditional, so I actually started my apprenticeship before A-level results day. I did get an A star and two A's, but I promise you don't need that. It's just because all three of my subjects were very similar: accounting, economics, and business. But honestly, you'll be fine with. You probably need grades less than that than you would to get into university. That tends to be the case. So if you need, I know, I'm trying to think, to do a law degree, you need A, B, B or something, then you probably get away with two B's and a C.
And I think part of that reason is that they're looking for, perhaps an employer is looking for all of those other qualities. It isn't just that academic studying. As you've said, it's those other things that they're looking for, with the work experience, with the personal qualities, the ability to talk to people, etc. And I think that is part and parcel. So I hope, Harry, that explains to you, perhaps, although Luke is very modest and obviously attained really well, that wasn't the condition of his offer. So that does show you that there are varying levels of offer.
I didn't know what my predicted grades or anything were, so for all they knew, I could fail in every A level. So
yeah,
if you do an apprenticeship and get a qualification, obviously no one asks for my GCSE results now because I give them my A level or my accounting qualification. So if you do an apprenticeship and you get onto your apprenticeship, as long as you get the grades to get onto that apprenticeship, you're probably not going to be putting your A levels on your CV. As bad as this sounds, speaking at Sixth Form College, you're probably not going to put your A levels on your CV in the next 10 years because then you build up more qualifications. So
and they're superseded, I think, aren't they, by the time you get to those qualifications? But actually, what is interesting about that is sometimes in some professions, they do refer back to your A levels, as you say, in years to come. If you were going on to do a degree, perhaps at university, they might want to look at that. So I would encourage all students, as I know you would, Luke, to attain the best possible results.
Definitely want your best grades. And the best grades possible also means you can keep them on your CV as well.
Absolutely. There's another question saying, is the government website best to apply for apprenticeships, or is there an alternative? And I think, I mean, from our point of view, Luke, we would suggest that signing up to the UCAS section of where it has apprenticeships, and you can actually sign up for an account where you can put in filters for your postcode and for job sectors, would be very useful, as well as the government website, and also the website of those places that you have researched and are interested in, because that's key.
A lot of companies now advertise their apprenticeships on sites like Indeed, just as normal jobs. Again, because apprenticeships can be pitched at different levels. So by only putting them on UCAS, they might miss a whole field of people that they're trying to target. But I would say UCAS is a good one. The government website is good because obviously most registered apprenticeship employers will advertise on there. But yeah, UCAS and again the companies' websites themselves.
Absolutely, because one of the things when you do your careers research, if you were doing something like, we'll say, looking for architecture or construction quantity surveying, you might go onto a website. Or just take as an example, then there are other architects and there are other construction firms. But if you look at Taylor Wimpey, for instance, I know that well, you can actually go to their careers tab on their website, you can go to their apprenticeships, and you can register an interest in advance. So actually, if they're not actually open to application at the time, you can register your interest and then you'll get notified. And actually, that's a really good way of showing. If just alert any tech students to Capgemini, a company who are recruiting in that field. And they again have just opened up their registration of interest. Their applications aren't actually open yet, but I think that just demonstrates that that's really important, to make sure if you've done your research, you've registered your interest, you've already sort of got your inside track for being contacted once the field opens. So please do that. I think Faye's just put some of those in the chat. If we go to some of the questions, and Luke, can I ask you, one of the questions somebody has asked in advance was how to stand out in your CV or application. And if you could just briefly encapsulate how you feel that students should approach that.
So one thing I would definitely say is keep it plain, keep it simple. A lot of the times, and people can be guilty of this, they will put a lot of information in and write it as if they're writing an English literature exam. But actually, you want to include and highlight yourself. So by keeping it brief and just including the important bits, now I've got a bit further into work. I'm helping recruit apprentices and other people that come into the NHS. And let me tell you, you read through long lists of things people have done, and you go like, you get a bit like, okay, and put it to one side. Whereas if you can highlight your main achievements, that tends to be better received, especially by older people, more experienced people who are recruiting. But on the flip side of that, don't discount anything because you think it's not relevant. So by playing a sports team, for example, it shows you can work well in a team, it shows you're committed to a hobby, and it might seem silly to you and you think people won't be bothered if I'm applying to a professional company, but it is all relevant. Or any part-time you've done or part-time work or work experience, again, it's all relevant. So don't not put anything on there because you think it's too silly. But then don't try and include too much information where people think there's too much to read, because they probably will put it to one side. So keep it simple, keep it precise, but get your main highlights on there, because you are trying to sell yourself. Like if you watch an advert on the telly and it's too long and too silly, you think like whatever. But if there's an advert on the telly and it's quick, precise, shows you what the product is, people think that's what I want. So that's what I would try and say.
I think that's a really good point as well, about keeping it concise and sort of making it more bullet pointed rather than prose, because actually business people, again, talking to a business audience, they don't have the time or the inclination to be reading an essay. So really well put over. Thank you. How do you manage studying alongside working in an apprenticeship? Just in brief, managing that time and commitment to both elements of an apprenticeship?
It's really easy because you have your allotted time sewn into your week. So, I mean, most full-time work is 37 and a half or 40 hours a week. So I do 37 and a half hours a week, but 6 hours of that week is in college. So obviously not King Edge, your employer will assign you to a college or a university or a professional school, and you will probably be in lessons during that time. So I do Monday to Friday, usually 8 till 4, but your typical 9 to 5 hours. And then on a Friday, it might not necessarily be a Friday, but you'll have day release where you go to the college, do your qualification, and around exam time, a couple of nights in the week, you might do a little bit of revision. But it's not like A levels where you're revising like every single night of the week, takes up your weekend. The time management is really easy, and especially you have a job where, and this is probably one of the hardest things when you go into work. is switching off, and you've got to learn to switch off because it will be there the next day. You know, people, especially if you're new and you want to make an impression, you'll learn after a couple of months that actually you can't do it because you'll burn yourself out. So when you leave the door from work, leave work behind you, enjoy your evening as you normally would, and then study. Usually you won't have to do that many extra hours. Around an exam, I might do 2 hours extra a week for a couple of weeks, 2 weeks before an exam. But again, it's not intensive like A level. It's intensive in the fact that you obviously have to switch into different modes. So I know people that go to college on a Wednesday, so they're 2 days in work, a day in college, and then 2 days back in work. But it's you don't necessarily have to manage your time in an apprenticeship, which is why it's so good because it is structured. So, but they don't spoon feed you the information as such. You have to go out your way and learn it yourself and make sure you know the information. But you have a teacher where they will teach you and they will help you. It's not like, I'd say they're probably like an A-level teacher at King Ed's. They're not a school teacher, not going to spoon feed you, but they're not a university lecturer that's very distant. So you actually get a nice hybrid. And they will help you manage your time. If they think you're falling behind, they'll say, you just need to brush up on this. So I wouldn't, if you're managing fine with A levels, it's nothing, it's no harder. Probably a lot easier actually.
Thanks, Luke. Can you talk to us a little bit about the NHS particularly, and the ability to perhaps, experience other roles and other areas of the NHS and how that might work? Because I think that's an area where we've had a few questions in advance as well.
Yeah, so not just in the NHS, every company, but I can talk about the NHS specifically as well. But I didn't even think about this before I applied. Every company, or most companies end up doing well, will have a finance department, they'll have a marketing department, they'll have a sales department, they'll have an operations department, public relations department. There's careers for anyone in most businesses, especially if you're looking at more corporate apprentices. So there's lots of scope to move around. So the NHS, I'm a management accountant, but I could easily move into a financial accountant role or income role or costing role. And in big organisations like the NHS, they tend to promote internally. So if you get on a ladder, and this is one thing I'll say, if you look at an apprenticeship wage and you think it's not very much, within 6 months, within a year, that'll double, that could triple. So don't be put off by putting a little bit of hard work into a low paid apprenticeship to start off with. Most companies now, like the NHS, will pay an apprentice the minimum wage to their age. So I wasn't paid apprenticeship wage, I was paid minimum wage for my age before I actually got my job, which was 6 months into my apprenticeship. So you can still carry on with your apprenticeship and have a full-time job, so they will give you the job early before the end. And with the NHS as well, it's really good because obviously I'm based at Worcester Acute, which the 3 hospitals are Worcester Royal, the Alex at Redditch, and then Kidderminster. But if I wanted to move to a different trust like Dudley and work at Russell's Hall, or Birmingham and work at the QE, I could equally do that. I mean, the QE's closest to my house, or Russell's Hall, they're probably in between. So I have to travel quite a bit to Worcester, but there's lots of opportunity to move around. And when you work in a company, but it is a business like the NHS, you meet so many different people. Whereas if you were just in a practice, you'd just be working with other accountants. What I deal with doctors, nurses, receptionists, cleaners, all sorts of different people. So it's not boring, like that. Does that answer the question?
It certainly does, and I think that it's actually taking a bit of a leap of faith sometimes to take that initial step, but it's evident from what you've said, and that actually where it can lead to can be quite a different place and give you a gateway, and to use that phrase, into a completely different sort of environment from where you started out in. And I think working with those different people and seeing different departments and, networking with a variety of different people can actually give you a much more mature perspective on your career sort of moves in the future. And
One thing
that's
to say as well is one of the worst things you can hear is, I'm going to university to do this degree because I don't know what I want to do. Well, actually, you're spending £40,000 on a risk. And within 5 years of someone getting a degree, I think it's like 75% of those people have moved into a different career field. So it's much less risky. If you know you want to do law or accounting and you go to do an apprenticeship, you might not even like that firm, but you could be there a year, you've got your qualification, and then you can move. It's you're not taking a risk, especially financially, and end up in so much debt just because you don't know what you want to do. So
I think that's about gaining life experience and working experience, as well as obviously your qualifications, and they are a really good combination to then take you on to perhaps a completely different field. And we're going to try and wrap up in a moment, but one of the things that I also wanted to tell students is that whilst we're talking about apprenticeships, it's actually really important to think about early entry careers as a phrase, because all jobs that you go for are not all called apprenticeships when you first go in there, or even actually ultimately. And that, as Luke said, sometimes you're working towards a professional qualification. So it might be a level 6, but it may not actually be a degree apprenticeship. And it's really important that you look at early entry careers, which are available to 18 plus, not just to apprenticeships, because if we look at a local law firm that we know here in Stourbridge, their early entry career is actually called an administrator, but they go on after about 6 months onto an apprenticeship. And that time spent in the administrator role is actually really key to getting that onto the next step. And I think it's being broad-minded about where you look and the phrases you're looking for. So again, if you go and look on some of these websites for some of the companies I've mentioned, you might actually see early entry careers rather than apprenticeships as a title. And I don't know if you've experienced that, Luke, but that's certainly true of quite a number of firms.
yeah, I mean, at work, sometimes we won't go out for an apprentice, we'll go out for sort of an accounts assistant. But actually, if you go down the job description, it'll say, you can do your qualification, we'll pay alongside that. And actually, there is no harm in, and a lot of places will offer this. So if you could go for an interview and ask, you could be there a year, and then they'll put you on an apprenticeship, or they'll say, we'll see what you're like, then we'll see what qualification best suits you. Because again, in accounting, there's so many different qualifications, and I don't think I never realised before I went into it, and I'd done quite a lot of research, just how much you could do just in one profession, really.
Yeah.
Think, I want to do this, I want to do that, but actually, after 6 months work, they might assess you and say, we're going to put you on an apprenticeship, but we want you to this qualification because we think you'll be better for that. And actually, you'd probably be like, yeah, okay. So that is what I'd say. And don't be disappointed if you don't get to do what you want to do straight away, because again, like Lou says, sometimes you do have to wait 6 months, but would you rather wait 6 months and have the experience, or go and do 3 years at university and have none? So,
and I think just running up to your application as well, Luke, and then we'll draw this to a close, but running up to your application, you had done a number of different things that meant that you were obviously going to be a good candidate And I think that was part-time work, volunteering, work experience. I know you worked at a football club, sort of, you know, you did all sorts of things that meant that on your CV, when you applied, you already had a whole raft of skills to offer that you've obviously matured and developed since, but you had those already. And that's where I really want to get home to the students who are online today, how important that preparation is during year 12 and into year 13.
I would say if you're in year 12 especially, don't waste time. Honestly, it goes like that. Like, I can't believe, even finishing school, there is no harm in going to University Open. Again, I'm not sat here saying you should do an apprenticeship. If you go to University Open Day and you think that's better for you, you need to do what you want to do. Careers, people can advise, you can listen to people like me, parents, friends. It's got to be your choice. What I'll say is, most of the time, what you feel is right because you know yourself. So, and again, most of the time, the things you're good at, the skills you have, find something to use those. Don't do something where you think it's going to be a chore. You know, I'm quite lucky because I don't wake up every morning and think, oh, I've got work. Sometimes I do, but I enjoy more what I do because I'm good at it. So find something you're good at, and like Lou says, if you've got those skills already, they'll drive you very quickly from the bottom of somewhere to a really good position quite early on in your career, really.
Thank you, Luke. You've been absolutely brilliant. We really appreciate it. And Faye's been very busy putting so many links in the chat. Thanks, Faye. You've got there lots of information. Faye, have you got anything you want to add before that we wrap up?
I think that's covered everything. There are a few very specific questions, but we can address those afterwards on an email. And yeah, thank you so much, Luke. It's so useful to have your input from, you know, taking you from college, the reality of it just a few years ago. It feels like no time at all. So it's really great for our students to be able to hear that. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And we'll circulate this recording around to our students who've been online today, but also registered but maybe weren't able to attend. So it'll get a wider audience, hopefully.
That's lovely. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending. If you've got any further questions that you want to ask, please email careers@keds.ac.uk and we'll put those to Luke if they're for Luke, or we'll answer them. So thank you very much indeed, Luke. Thanks, Faye. And thank you to all the students online.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.